Hi everyone, excited to be here. So my name is Itai Zauer. I'm part of the Microsoft Defender for Identity product management team here at Microsoft, and I'm joined by Naya, who will present herself in a couple of minutes. And today I'm going to talk or to cover how we can basically protect identities, and specifically in the cloud area, by protecting the identity fabric. And let's have a quick overview of today's session. So we will start with a real-life identity attack story. Then we will talk about how we can provide protection for identities given those kind of attacks, and we will end up with a demo. So handing over to you, Naya, for covering again the attack that we want to share with everyone. So handing it to you.
Thank you, Itai. Hi, everyone. I'm Naya, a security researcher in Microsoft Defender. And today, I'm going to take you through a real-life attack scenario. The threat actor is a very sophisticated actor with strong social engineering skills and proficiency in English, which gives them a leverage that you will see in the minute. Can you click next? First, they do discovery. Here, they study the organization. The threat actor collects information about the org to study the structure of the org. They study the employees and cherry pick their victim. They choose a high privileged user that might have great access to internal resources. Next, please. Next, they socially engineer to gain initial access. Here, the actor calls help desk, impersonating the victim user, asking them very politely to reset the password and change the multi-factor authentication. The help desk, thinking it's the original user, complies to the actor's requests, changing the password and the MFA phone number. And like this, the actor gains initial access to the org. Next. Once the actor is done with help desk, they go ahead and check if the social engineering was successful by gaining access to the organization's cloud environment. So they sign in to Azure Portal using the new credentials of the victim user. Next. Then they explore Microsoft's 365 services, view VPN documentations, and onboarding files to make sure that they are blending in, laying low, and stay undetected. Next. Then they move to third-party infrastructure. Their motive here is to gain access to resources that they don't have access to using this user. So they laterally move to other users to do that. Since the actor has inside information at this point, they choose a higher privileged user to do so. And once he is compromised, the user is compromised. Next, please. They use that user to gain access to sensitive platforms to hide their track, as you can see with CyberArk here. Next, please. Lastly, the actor gains deeper control into the system of the victim organization and from Microsoft services to third-party platforms. This attack resulted in a wide disruption of operations for the victim organization in internal systems and external systems, customer-facing systems, which is really unfortunate, in addition to the theft of sensitive data. Passing back to you, Itai.
Thank you, Naya. So basically what we have learned, right, meaning based on this attack story. So first, we learned that identities are the perimeter, meaning if few years back, in order to break into organization, threat actors may use sophisticated techniques. Now it's quite simple, meaning everything that I need to do is actually convince someone that to provide me his credentials and I'm in, right? And based on that, I can kind of move laterally within the organization and do some bad stuff, right? So again, identities are the perimeter, and in the end, the techniques that threat actors are using today are social engineering, phishing, but again, relatively simple techniques. What we also learned is that identities are actually spanning across many different systems, right? And think of any of us within the organizations that we are working in. we are using different systems, right? Like many of those. It can be on-prem systems, can be cloud systems, can be SaaS, can be even like IAM solutions. So our digital identity footprint is actually spanning across all those kind of systems. And again, that's also part of the learning from the attack story. And lastly, another kind of important aspect is that identities are complex, meaning it's not that it's only spanning across different systems. There are also advanced scenarios or kind of complex scenarios where, for example, people may own multiple accounts in the same system. And because of that, again, that actually makes things more complex, and that's part of the challenges that organizations are facing. So our way to basically protect it is to protect the identity fabric, meaning we want to protect any identity out there from any kind, for example, human, non-human, from any source or environment. It can be an AD, Active Directory account, Entra account, IAM accounts. If you think about it, there are like few IAM solutions like PAM solutions, Privileged Access Management, IGA, Identity Governance Administrations, solutions that actually being used by organizations to manage identities. So if those systems are being attacked, that can lead to critical situations, right? Meaning, if my PAM is being taken over, that can lead into privileged account taken over, or if my IGN is being taken over, again, the threat actor can use it in order to spin up accounts across different systems. So protecting IAM system is also super important. On top of that, obviously, SaaS, again, today, we are in the cloud area, as mentioned before. Everyone are using SaaS applications, so it's also important to protect and understand SaaS identities as well. And lastly, of course, cloud, starting from Azure, AWS, GCP. Again, understanding this context as well about identities is also super critical. So again, we want to kind of understand the identity fabric. And also, super important as well, again, also it's important to protect and understand also identity-related elements like servers that managing identities, like domain controller, ADFS, ADCS, and Entra Connect. And again, by that, we want to provide identity-centric protection on top of this kind of fabric. Now, I know that, again, that's a bit high level, so let's bring it down a bit, and let's see a real-life example of such an identity fabric, and then we can also talk about how we can protect it. So for this example, please meet Eric. Eric is an IT administrator on a company called Acme. When looking on Eric's footprint, again, across the organization, it starts with an AD account, which being synced to Entra ID, again, a common hybrid deployment. From Entra ID is the main single sign-on for the company. Eric can sign into M365 and ServiceNow. These actually two accounts are being used on daily basis, again, to sign into M365, send emails, chat on Teams, upload files to SharePoint. Now, in addition to that, Eric's identity footprint is actually spanning across additional systems, meaning this specific organization also using Okta for some use cases. So Eric has an user account in Okta, and from Okta, he can sign into AWS and GitHub. And another important fact about Eric is that he has a Salesforce account. Now, one thing that is very important to illustrate here is that specifically, Eric can sign into Salesforce directly, meaning he doesn't need to go through a single sign-on, which might be a risk, again, because then some security policies that being set at a single sign-on level are not being applied to this kind of situation. So that's, again, how identities are spanning across different systems, but I also mentioned that the identity fabric is complex. So let's see how that actually looks like, right? So I mentioned earlier that Eric has its own day-to-day account on Entra ID, eric@acme.com, but one additional fact about Eric is that he has additional account, ericadmin@acme.com. So this admin account is actually a privileged account within Entra, and it's being used not daily, but again, from time to time when Eric needs to elevate its permission and do some administrative actions, or either within the M365 suite or even like beyond that, because from this privileged account, Eric can sign into CyberArk and then either elevate its permission or even like use a privileged account being stored in the PAM. In that case, it will be CyberArk, right? So at the end, again, we can see that specifically with Eric, again, the complexity is that actually Eric has two different accounts within the same system, within the same Entra ID tenant. And those two different accounts actually are not sharing any kind of strong identifiers, meaning it has different VPN, different names. So many protection systems might overlook that, and again, we'll treat it as two different identities or accounts. And again, our goal is to understand everything and basically compile it into a single identity view, and based on that, provide single identity protection. So that's about Eric. And I want to touch a little bit more about, again, the complexities, right? So with Eric, again, we mentioned about the regular and privileged scenario, where again, Eric, for example, has his day-to-day account being used for daily activities, but because he's the IT admin of the company, he has an additional account, a privileged one. So that's one kind of scenario. There is another quite common scenario where customers may have multiple tenants or multiple domains, and few users may have accounts in both tenants or both domains. Again, it can be because of M&As, mergers and acquisitions. It can be because of like kind of big organizations with a complex structure. But at the end, people may have multiple accounts spanning across multiple tenants, multiple domains, and that's another thing that we want to accommodate. And lastly, and again, that's also quite common, test and service accounts, meaning most organizations, for example, have sandbox environment and also have service accounts that are being used to run things programmatically. And also here we want to understand those kind of situation where identity, where someone in the organization own, for example, test account or again, a service account. So those are the complex use cases. And you know, so I think we quite kind of covered why the identity fabric is complex. We also saw that it's kind of spanning across many, many different systems. But now let's understand how Defender can help protecting it. So our protection actually starting with the unified identity inventory. And with the unified identity inventory, we want to have first a single pane of glass view into every identity across the organization, which coming from any kind of source, like mentioned before, it can be Active Directory, Enter ID, IAM systems, for example, like Okta, and enterprise applications like M365. Now, the unified identity inventory should provide you a single pane of glass into identities in two levels. One, again, it should show you all the identities across the different systems in one place. But then even when looking into a specific identity, I want to understand the identity footprint across the different systems, meaning what kind of application it can access, or in other words, in what applications it has accounts. We call it accounts, right? Meaning if I can sign into Enter ID, that means that I have an account. If I can sign into Salesforce, that means that I have a Salesforce account. So understanding where I have accounts across the fabric, across the systems. And then also, of course, role assignments, right? Meaning I want to understand who is privileged and where. Just a simple example about why it's so important, right? Let's say that I have an Enter ID account and a Salesforce account, and the Salesforce account is actually federated by Entra, right? So I can, within one click after signing into Entra, I can jump into Salesforce. Now, let's say that I see some suspicious activity on the Enter ID account. Again, someone is trying to brute force the account, for example. By knowing the fabric and knowing that the same identity, also owning a Salesforce account, and this Salesforce account is also privileged, again, it has some role assigned to it, that can help me when triaging data, meaning it can help me to understand how would react to that, meaning it's quite critical to know that this identity is actually privileged somewhere across the fabric, and within a single click from this entry account, I can actually go into Salesforce, right? And again, using this privileged Salesforce account to do some bad stuff within Salesforce, right? So again, that kind of context is what we want to provide within the unified identity profile of identities. On top of that, group membership, again, across the different systems, super important as well. Organizational context. When I'm investigating threats about specific identity, it's also important to know who is this person. Is it like a C-level? Maybe he's from finance team. I want to get the organizational context about the person by knowing the job title, knowing where he positioned within the organization, who is the manager, who are the peers. Again, just to get more context about the identity. In addition to that, devices. Again, we want to provide you kind of visibility, also the devices being used by the identity. Again, super important as well, because in some cases, threat actors may try to move laterally from a compromised device into the cloud, or to break into some identity accounts, I would say, across the fabric. And in addition to that, non-human accounts, right? So we mentioned earlier service accounts. So I want to be able to show you this kind of a unified identity profile, which also includes what kind of service accounts are being owned by the identity as well. Because again, the idea here is that if some component of the identity is being compromised, the threat actor might be able to leverage that and move to a different component of the identity. And lastly, settings, which are mostly MFA, I would say, meaning we want to show you kind of what is the MFA configuration for each and single account when applicable. It's not all the time applicable because today many applications use single sign-on. But again, where there is no single sign-on, it's also important to show what kind of accounts are protected, or at least the MFA is set correctly, and where it's not set correctly. So that's the unified identity inventory, and it's important to mention that again we talked about protection, right? So it's a great visibility tool. It's providing visibility into all identities across the organization, and more than that, it actually shows you a kind of a deep dive into identities. But it's just a vehicle actually to provide the protection, right? So let's see how the protection look like. So with the unified identity inventory in place, now we can actually provide identity-centric protection. So let's see what it actually means. So as mentioned before, the unified identity inventory, again, it's being integrated with many data sources, and we are expanding that as well, again, as the time will go. It's also integrated, of course, with the XDR, getting signals from the different workloads within XDR. But then using all this information, what we actually can do is provide identity-centric protection. And let's see actually how that comes to play. So it starts with discovery and visibility. Like mentioned before, I can see all the identities across all the systems, again, with a single kind of pane of glass view, which is, again, first visibility is super important. But then let's talk a bit about detections or incidents and alerts. Meaning, think about a situation where there is there is a detection based on telemetry that we are collecting from Active Directory, and then there is another alert based on telemetry that we are collecting from Entry ID, and then there is another alert based on telemetry from Okta, right? So there are like 3 different alerts. Each alert is related to a different user account, different system. But if now we have the unified identity inventory in place, we can use it in order to enrich those alerts with the identity context, actually telling XDR that all those alerts are actually related to the same person, same identity. And by that, providing a single identity containing those 3 alerts based on the identity correlation. So you can better understand that something is going on with this identity. And by the way, I will demonstrate it in a couple of minutes. Obviously, within investigation is also super important as well, meaning, let's say that there is this incident. Now I want to understand what happened. So I want to see a unified identity timeline across the different systems. So again, by having the unified identity inventory in place, I can actually do that, meaning have a single pane of glass into what this identity did across the different systems. And then response, of course, meaning let's say that we determined that the identity was compromised. Now I want to respond to that. Now, as mentioned before, the incident includes signals from multiple services, multiple components of the identity fabric. So now I want to react in the same way, meaning I want to either like disable or maybe revoke session across the different components that were compromised, right? So I want to be able to respond at the identity level as well. And that's, of course, part of the identity protection that we are providing. Now, lastly, threat protection is super important, but we're also trying to prevent threat. That's by being proactive. And we have the posture component within XDR. And also here we want to provide identity-centric posture view, meaning showing all the posture recommendations related to an identity. And more than that, show attack paths how basically threat actors can move across the fabric. So again, all of that together, that's actually the identity-centric protection that we want to provide. The unified identity inventory is, again, the vehicle for it, but the goal is having this kind of identity-centric protection. So with that, let's actually see it live in the real product. Cool. So our journey begins with the unified identity inventory. So under Assets, Identities, I will just click on it. I think it's a bit small, so let me zoom in. And what we can see here, again, that's the single pane of glass into all identities across the different systems, meaning you can see Entry ID identities, Active Directory. And again, if I will scroll down, you will see also identities coming from Okta, for example. And again, basically, it will come from much more sources in the future, but at the end, that's the unified identity inventory that we have. And then specifically, you remember Eric from the example before, so let's zoom in on Eric for a second. So when looking on Eric, what we can see is that actually Eric identity is spanning across different systems, Active Directory, Entry ID, Okta, and more. Let's click on Eric. to actually see the details about him, right? Meaning I mentioned that the unified identity inventory first provides visibility across the different identities, but now I can actually drill down and see also the actual footprint of Eric. So for that, I will jump into Observed in Organization tab. And then I have the new account tab. And that's actually a feature that is right now in preview, released around 2 weeks back, which provide a single pane of glass into Eric's footprint across the fabric. So what we can see here is that actually Eric has 3 accounts: Active Directory, Entry, and Okta. You can see, by the way, that the first 3 accounts are appearing as one account set. Account set means that those 3 accounts are actually sharing some strong identifiers, and you can see it here. And basically, all those 3 accounts are being correlated to Eric automatically by the system, meaning you don't need to do anything in order to make it correlate, meaning by just deploying the sensor, the Active Directory sensor, and connecting the Okta connector, all those 3 accounts will be correlated automatically to Eric. So that's, again, like if you remember when we talked about the slides, that's actually having multiple identity components across different systems as a one kind of single pane of glass. But then I mentioned before that identities are complex, right? And what you can see also is that there are 2 additional account sets, meaning this account set was correlated to Eric manually, and that's also part of the new capability that is now in preview and was just released, where you can actually correlate accounts to identities, again, based on your unique fabric within your organization. And what happened here is that we are seeing that there is an additional Active Directory account from a different domain that was correlated to Eric, because again, this account is actually being used by Eric. And by the way, it's important to mention that again, it's not something that the system detected itself. Again, it's something that the customer will have to set up. In addition to that, there is another account, an Entry account. You can see here, by the way, that also here the UPN is different. The display name is different. So again, it's not trivial to understand that those accounts are actually belonging to the same identity or person. And also here again, there is a custom correlation that link this account to Eric. And what you can see is that again, this account is also a global administrator. So actually, as mentioned before, Eric has its Entry, the day-to-day account being used to send emails, chat on Teams, upload files to SharePoint. But in addition to that, he has a privileged account in Entry. And by actually having those custom correlations, now actually we understand the real footprint of Eric, again, across the different systems. And based on that, now we can provide the identity-centric protection that I just mentioned earlier. So let's have a quick view into the security recommendations, for example. Again, I've mentioned that that's part of the value that, again, that's part of the identity-centric protection, right? So, for example, here, we can see all the posture recommendations related to Eric based on all the accounts belonging to Eric. You can see that one recommendation is actually related to his Okta account with this UPN. And there is an additional recommendation related to his AD account, as you can see, with a different UPN. And again, it's basically the 2 accounts that were linked together with a correlation mechanism. And that's basically what allows us to provide this kind of identity-centric view of the posture recommendations. Now, when going to incidents and alerts, I can see also this incident. And what we can see here is that Eric has multiple alerts actually clamped into one incident. And that's, again, based on the identity correlation. What we can see here is that first we see some anonymous sign in to Okta, which is, again, it might be suspicious, might be not. Again, it's not that super critical. But then we also see another alert for also kind of anonymous signing into the privileged Entry account owned by Eric, right? So again, 2 signals from 2 different locations. And then we see actually a third signal or detection about Eric, and this time about his AD account, right? So actually, again, combining those different detections across the fabric by the identity context is super, super powerful, because if it was just this alert, I might be overlooking on that. Maybe, again, for each alert by itself, again, it's not that severe, it's not that significant. But again, combining all signals together into one incident, single pane of glass, that's actually what makes it as critical, and that's basically the call to action to the customer, to the SOC analyst, in order to actually point out that something going on with Eric, pay attention. And lastly, again, we talked about the incident, we talked about the posture recommendations. Let's say that I determined that Eric identity was compromised. Now I want to react to that. And to do that, I can go ahead, click disable, and then what I can do is disable, again, the accounts across Eric's fabric, meaning I can, it's quite granular, meaning I can decide to go and disable few accounts, or I can go ahead and disable all the accounts altogether. But again, it allows me to react at the identity level, meaning based on the understanding that Eric owns different accounts across different systems, now I can respond in the same way, meaning I can respond across the fabric. So I can click disable, and the accounts were disabled, and basically here the triage ends in this case. So I think by that we concluded also the demo. Getting back to the slides. So I think at that point we will accept some questions. Gershon, any question that you want to point out? Or Almog, maybe?
Okay, I can read one out loud. Okay. So can Microsoft Entra operate in environments that use access control models such as ABAC, attribute-based access control, RBAC, and PBAC, policy-based access control? Additionally, does it provide capabilities for segregation of duties analysis to ensure compliance and prevent role conflicts?
So I must say that, okay, so let me hold on, read through the question. I apologize for that.
You're good. I put it in our internal chat as well.
Yeah, thank you. So at the end, the Defender does provide scoping, if I'm reading it correctly, meaning it does allow organizations to segregate the data. Let's say that you have an organization who is spanning across different domains. Again, that's just one example. And you want to kind of scope what the analyst sees based on the domain. You want that some analysts will see information coming from, or signals coming from domain A, and some other analysts may see signals coming from domain B. So that kind of, we call it scoping, and this kind of capability exists already in Defender. So basically, yes. Again, you need to understand what is the complexity of the demand, but at the end, yes, the idea is that you will be able to scope the information for the analyst, so he will see only the information he is allowed to see.
Great, thank you. Okay, another question. How would Defender identity correlate to app identities ownership, which the owner has credentials?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I will try to answer it. So if we're talking here about NHI non-human, so that's something that we are looking into. I cannot share many details about it, but I would say that please sign into the community page that mentioned earlier by Renee, I think, to hear more updates in the future, but that's definitely something that we are looking into. And I think there is also a question about, will it show role assigned and scope on identities? So the idea is yes, of course. I think I also showed it in the demo how you can see a role assigned to an Entra ID account. So yes, the unified identity inventory will show role assignment.
Okay.
So there is another question here. I can see, what is the main point of Defender for identity? Why do we need it? We need it in addition to Defender for servers. How to convince your CISO? So that's actually a great question. Meaning, at the end, Defender for identity is protecting people, right? And Defender for servers is actually kind of an endpoint solution that monitoring what's going on the endpoint. But in many cases, I can use my own device, for example, again, which is not monitored, and then I'm interacting directly with the cloud, with Entra ID, with SaaS applications, and for that, again, you need also the MDI piece, right? In order to bring in or to kind of monitor what people are doing across the different systems, not only on the endpoint. Because again, today, with the movement to the cloud, more and more systems are in the cloud, and because of that, again, you need additional kind of layers in order to monitor identities also across those kind of systems.
Okay, I have another. Can you remove accounts, roles from Okta, ping, etc.? Is it just Entra and AD?
So it's also supported for Okta. I apologize, the demo didn't show the Okta one. I'm not sure why, but it should also work for Okta. And I would say like that, I cannot share what other kind of sources will be added in the future. What I can say that when a source will be added, it will be added also with the remediation capabilities. So again, it will be in par with what we have with Entra, with the Okta, sorry. So it should include any additional source should include also response.
Thank you. All right. I do not see accounts under users in the observed and organization tab. Is this something that needs to be activated? We are hybrid Entra ID, and we have MDI and all domain controllers.
So that's, as mentioned before, both the accounts view and the linking capability, the account correlation capability is in preview. So if you are not seeing the tab right now, please make sure that you opt in for there is a preview flag somewhere in the settings on the XDR. So just make sure that you opt in for it, because it might be that's the reason that you're not seeing it. And if it's not the case, so please open a support case and then we will look into that.
Thank you. All right, the manual linking in the demo, is that done via a general rule, custom pattern matching, or manually identity by identity?
So right now it's manual, but I can say that we are looking to expand it in the near future. I cannot share details, but again, please again, join to the community page mentioned earlier for updates. There will be soon.
Thank you. And we'll share that community page soon again. Do you need Defender for Identity when Entra ID protection is already in use in hybrid setup?
Yes, meaning it's important to mention that Entra ID protection, again, it's superior when protecting on Entra accounts, and it's super, again, effective to prevent threats. But as mentioned before, the differentiation between Entra ID protection and MDI is that MDI actually trying to bring in the full identity context in play, meaning Entra ID is in the front line, I would say, protecting access, and Defender is actually getting all the information about identities from different systems, providing kind of more holistic protection across the fabric, again, providing also additional context, like mentioned before, meaning think about the situation, I think I mentioned it earlier, where I have an Entra account, an Entra ID account, the Entra ID account is not privileged, but this Entra ID account actually is a single sign-on to a privileged Salesforce account, right? And we can bring this additional context, which will also help to or kind of enrich the Entra ID detection, right? So what I'm trying to say is that Entra ID, again, protects Entra ID, and again, it does an amazing job in doing that. And with MDI, we can even do better together by having additional identity context across the fabric, again, across different systems, because at the end, as mentioned before, we know that the identities are spanning across different systems, and also there are like complex situations where a person identity may own multiple accounts in the same system. So again, we are basically providing this additional context on top of that. So how do we connect? I can see, by the way, another question, how do we connect identities from different apps, Okta, Entra, Salesforce, One CRM? So those will be with, meaning AD identities being synced by the sensor that we have within Defender. Entra ID identities are being synced automatically, and all the rest is via an API connectors that you can deploy. It's part of the product. This basically the IAM solutions is, or like Okta, for example, that's under Defender for Identity. SaaS is basically under the MDA side of the house. So I see another question. You mentioned that having a single source of truth is important. How does identity ensure that this is kept up to date? So it's important to mention that we are syncing identities continuously from all the sources that we are connected to. That's one thing. And second, again, as mentioned, please stay tuned about the more correlation capabilities, and those correlation capabilities will be helped. We can be helped with these kind of scenarios, but again, please stay tuned with the community about like where and when those kind of capabilities are ready.
Okay, let me check for anything else. I don't see anything else from our moderators, so this may last call. Okay. So they mentioned they'll follow up on other questions in the chat. So I am ready. Any last comments, Itai, before I wrap it up?
No, guys, thank you for watching today. And again, we would like to see you again in a few months in the next webinar that I promise that we will share more updates with you soon. So stay tuned for the next webinar and hope to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you, Itai and Naya, for being our guests today and for sharing the great information with our community. Also, thank you to the Q&A team who helped us with answering the questions and providing with the resourceful information. To all the listeners still on the line, if you're someone who wishes to aid in the protection of the world from cyber threats and desire to have a say in shaping our strategies, blueprints, and recommendations, then we invite you to become part of our security community. Together, we can make a global impact. So join us at aka.ms/securitycommunity. This is also where you'll be notified by the upcoming webinars, events, and other announcements. For those of you who may have additional questions on this topic that we covered or other product-related questions, please feel free to raise them on our Microsoft Tech Community discussion space at aka.ms/Microsoft Defender for Identity Community Hub. Thank you all for being part of our community and for joining us on these webinars. We hope to see you next time. Goodbye.